Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear students, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm your biology expert amreenamehraj, and today I'm in front of you with lecture number 2 for class 10th, subject biology. The chapter which we have started is life processes. I have already made you understand what life processes are. I simply quote that all the activities which are performed by living organisms in order to maintain or to sustain their lives, or simply you can say all the activities which are performed by living organisms in order to remain alive, they are called the life processes. Now today we are going to take up the first life process, that is the process of nutrition. In order for you people to have an idea that what we are going to understand and what are the different subtopics which we are going to take up under this nutrition topic, they are as follows. So nutrition, first of all, is, my dear students, simply the process of intake of food and utilization of food by the body of an organism. Now, nutrition is divided into two types. We have autotrophic mode of nutrition and we have this heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Autotrophic mode of nutrition we will discuss in detail, under which we have to take up the concept of Photoautotrophs and Chemo Autotrophs. In case of heterotrophic mode of nutrition, we have to understand about parasitic mode of nutrition, saprotrophic mode of nutrition, Holozoic mode of nutrition, and last but not the least, I will give you an idea about Mixotrophic mode of nutrition. Now, my dear students, we have to discuss each and every category in detail. Here comes this Holozoic mode of nutrition, under which we have to go into the details of Holozoic mode of nutrition in amoeba, and we have to look at Holozoic mode of nutrition in man, whereby we are supposed to go into the concepts of human digestive system. Further, we have to go into the mechanism. We have to understand how the process of digestion takes place in man. This is all which comes under the nutrition topic for class 10th. It's very simple for class 10th. And remember, under autotrophic mode of nutrition, we have to understand the process of photosynthesis in plants in detail. Now let us take up these topics one by one. First of all, I'll start with what nutrition is. Nutrition, my dear students, this word is derived from the word nutrient. Pay attention. You might have heard about this word nutrient. Nutrition word is derived from the word nutrient. So what is nutrition basically is? It is simply intake of nutrients. Intake of nutrients by the organism. Okay? Pay attention, it's very important. And not only intake of nutrients by the organism, nutrition involves the utilization part also. It involves the utilization of nutrients by the organism. Now, for what an organism will utilize the nutrients? For the purpose of getting energy, or energy in the form of ATP, or for building the body. Building the body. So we need nutrition, we need nutrients rather for building our body. By building, I mean to say for the process of growth and development. Pay attention. So organisms need nutrients. For what? For getting energy or for the growth and development of their bodies. Now, the process which involves the same thing, the process which involves the intake of nutrients and the utilization of nutrients to get energy and to build the body, that process is called the process of nutrition. Say for example, you're feeling hungry, then you take a biscuit. That biscuit is basically a packet of nutrients. So you intake that biscuit. the process of taking up that biscuit into your body, and then your body utilizing this biscuit, the nutrients in this biscuit, in order to give you energy. That process of intake and utilization is your process of nutrition. Now, what is this nutrient? How we can define this nutrient, my dear students? Nutrients are the substances. Okay, say for example the biscuit, say for example the plate of a food, say for example potato chips for that matter. They are the substances which are taken by an organism from its surroundings. The substances taken by an organism from its surroundings. For what? For obtaining the same thing I've told you earlier, for obtaining energy, either for obtaining energy or for growth and development of body. All those substances which we take up, all those substances could be organic or they could be inorganic. Okay, so you have to remember these substances could be organic or they could be inorganic, okay? And we take up these substances from where? We take up these substances from the environment, and we require these substances for getting energy and for growth and development of the body. Those substances are called the nutrients. For example, if you are thinking about what could be a nutrient, you know them from your lower classes. Say for example, you have the carbohydrates. Okay, you have the fats, you have for that matter the proteins, you have minerals, you have vitamins, and the very important component, that is water. All of these are basically the nutrients. So once you are taking food, you're basically taking these nutrients, and your body is utilizing these nutrients for getting energy or for the growth and development. That process is called nutrition, whereas these substances are called the nutrients. Okay, now my dear students, over here, try and remember that carbohydrates, fats, proteins, minerals, if we look at these three, they are very important, okay? These three. These are complex in nature. These are complex in nature. By saying they are complex in nature, I mean to say that, say for example, if I take carbohydrate, these are the long chains of sugars. So it's going to be something like this. A long chain, even at some point it could be branched also. It's a long chain of sugars. Say for example, it could be a chain of glucose. Okay, so isn't this carbohydrate complex? It is made up of so many glucoses. Over here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here it is made up of 8 glucoses, say for example. So carbohydrate is not simple, it's a complex substance. Similarly, if I'll talk about protein, it is also a long chain. It's a long chain of amino acids. Okay, so everything has a building block. Say for example, your house is made up of bricks. Okay, similarly, carbohydrates are made up of sugars, for example, glucose. Your proteins are made up of amino acids. So it's going to be a chain of amino acids. If we talk about fat, it's not a polymer, it's not a chain, but it's again made up of 2 important components. In fats, you have 2 important components. You have the fatty acids and you have a molecule of glycerol. Okay. Try and remember this thing because you need to have this information for this class 10th. So once you take up something, say for example, you have taken a meal of biryani. So once you take a biryani, suppose this is a plate of biryani over here, and we have so much of the rice in it. Okay, once I say rice, I mean to say carbohydrate. Suppose there is a chicken piece over here. Suppose this is a piece of chicken over here. Okay, so this, suppose, say for example, this doesn't look any chicken piece, but still, suppose this is a chicken piece. So here you are talking about a protein. Okay, suppose obviously the chicken has some quantity of fat also, so it has got fat also. So if you are taking up this plate of biryani, you are using it, you are consuming it, you are taking it inside your body. What are you basically taking inside your body is carbohydrate in the form of rice, protein in the form of chicken, fat in the form of chicken, or maybe the oil which is present in the biryani. So you are taking what? You are taking complex substances. You are taking complex substances, and then your body breaks them into these simple substances. Okay, so what are the simple substances? I have encircled them for you people. These encircled substances are simple nutrients. Okay, they are simple nutrients. So you take up complex food, and then you have a body which is designed by Almighty Allah in such a way that it can break these complex nutrients into simple substances which could then be used by your body for getting energy or for growth and development of the body. Now let us take up the types of nutrition in detail. Now my dear students, I have already made you aware about nutrition could be divided into two types. Okay, you have two broad types. Number one is the autotrophic mode of nutrition. So now we are going to talk about the types, the modes. So let me write down the modes of nutrition. So number one type is the autotrophic mode of nutrition, and the second type is heterotrophic mode of nutrition. They are very simple. There is no complication at all. They are very, very simple. If I make you understand like this, if you put into consideration, I'll give you one example. If you put into consideration green plants, okay, I have specified this green because green is an indication of chlorophyll. Green is an indication of the process of photosynthesis. We have some plants which are non-green. So for example, we have cuscuta. It's a non-green plant. It cannot perform photosynthesis. So that is not a, autotrophic organism. In this case, I'll give you an example of animals. Say for example, I'll give you the example of man. What is the major difference between the two is that green plants, they can synthesize their own food. Whereas man cannot synthesize its own food. It's always depend on other organisms. We eat animals, we eat plants, we eat both animals and plants, but we cannot manufacture our own food. Whereas plants, they manufacture their own food. That is the difference between autotrophic mode of nutrition and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. These organisms which show autotrophic mode of nutrition, they can prepare their own food. Whereas these cannot prepare their own food. They depend on other organisms in order to get their nourishment. If we look at the words autotrophic, it is derived from, pay attention, it is derived from two Greek words. This word autotrophic is derived from two Greek words. One word is auto and another word is troph. Auto word means self. That means these organisms are going to be independent. Self, that means they can by themselves synthesize their food. And troph is the nutrition. So troph is simply the nutrition. So they show self-nutrition. That means they can prepare their own food. They can prepare their own food from simple, inorganic raw materials. My dear students, make a note of these words, okay? So these organisms which show this mode of nutrition, they can prepare their own food from simple inorganic raw materials. And what are these inorganic raw materials? We know from the process of photosynthesis, they are going to be the carbon dioxide and water. So these organisms, I mean to say green plants, they only require these two inorganic raw materials, and out of these two inorganic raw materials they can synthesize their own food. But this heterotrophic, they cannot synthesize. Again, this is derived from two Greek words. What is derived from two Greek words? This word. It's derived from two Greek words. One word is heteros. One word is heteros, and another word is again the troph. Okay? Heteros means others. Okay? Heteros means others. That means they are dependent on others. Okay? And troph is simply the nutrition. So what do you get to conclude is man. Yeah, all the organisms which have heterotrophic mode of nutrition, they cannot synthesize. Synthesize means simply prepare or manufacture. They cannot synthesize their own food. They cannot synthesize their own food. Rather, they use or they consume. They consume ready-made food. They consume ready-made food either in the form of the plants or in the form of the animals or in the form of both plants and animals. But they cannot synthesize. They take up ready-made food. They cannot synthesize their own food. That's very, very important. Now, my dear students, can you tell me what do you call these green plants now? Since they show autotrophic mode of nutrition, what do you call them? What is the word you will use for these green plants? You will call them autotrophs. What do you call them? You'll call them autotrophs since they show the autotrophic mode of nutrition. You will call them autotrophs. Or there is another word you can give them because they can produce food. Okay? In ecosystems, in environment, in food chains, we call them producers. They produce what? They produce the food. So this is the terminology for all the organisms which show autotrophic mode of nutrition. Now, the organisms like man, what is the term you will use for the man? It's very easy for you people to guess. What is the term you will use for the man? We call man a heterotroph. So all the organisms which show heterotrophic mode of nutrition, you will call them heterotrophs. For example, man is a heterotroph. Or since they consume, we call them consumers. What do we call them? Consumers. So you got the terminology over here. Okay? You got the terminology. So these are called autotrophs, whereas these which are dependent on others are called heterotrophs or consumers. Now, for the time being, let us focus first of all on these organisms. We'll finish the autotrophs and then I'll take you to the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Now, my dear students, pay attention. So, the example for autotrophic mode of nutrition was plants. Okay? If I'll ask, what are the organisms which show autotrophic mode of nutrition called? Your answer must be, ma'am, they are called Autotrophs. And if I ask what they do, your answer must be that, ma'am, they can synthesize their own food. Now, autotrophs are of two types, remember. They are of how many types? Two types. Number one are the Photoautotrophs. Okay? Number one are the Photoautotrophs. Number two are the Chemoautotrophs. Very simple. Photoautotrophs are those autotrophic organisms, or they are those autotrophs which use sunlight as a source of energy. Say for example, if you think of green plants, what do they require? Earlier I told you that green plants require 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. They require 6 molecules of water. These are the inorganic raw materials. What do they need? What else? They need energy. So what provides them energy is sunlight. So they get their energy from sunlight. And for trapping this sunlight, they have this pigment called chlorophyll, which has the job to trap this sunlight. So this sunlight acts as an energy. It provides energy to combine the two somehow in order to produce food. So what is food is C6H12O6. This is glucose. Glucose, or this is the food which plant is manufacturing. This is the food which plant is synthesizing. And in this process, plant also releases 6 molecules of oxygen. So photoautotrophs basically perform this reaction. They perform this reaction, what we call photosynthesis. Remember. What about the chemoautotrophs, and who are these chemoautotrophs? There is a surprise for you people. There are some bacteria. Okay? Let me give an example. I will quote nitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying bacteria, they are present in your soil. They participate in your nitrogen cycle. I'll quote an example of iron bacteria, again present in your soil. I'll quote an example of sulfur bacteria. These are some bacteria. Now the question is, ma'am, can bacteria be also autotroph? Yes, some bacteria are autotrophs, but they are not photoautotrophs. They are chemoautotrophs. What does that mean? They do not depend on sunlight. Rather, they perform some chemical reactions. So these chemoautotrophs perform some chemical reactions in the soil, during which energy is released. Understand? So they perform some chemical reactions. During those chemical reactions, energy is released, and they use the same energy which is released during these chemical reactions to synthesize their own food. So the reaction is same, but they are not dependent on sunlight. They get this energy from the chemical reactions they perform, and they use the same energy to synthesize their own food. This process is not called photosynthesis. This process is given the name chemosynthesis. So what is this process called? Let me erase this over here. This process is called, this process which is done by the bacteria, it is called chemosynthesis. What is it called? Chemosynthesis. Okay. So autotrophs can synthesize their own food. They synthesize their own food for which they require energy. If they get the energy from sunlight, you will call them the photoautotrophs. If they get the energy by performing chemical reactions like these bacteria, then you call them the Chemoautotrophs. So, autotrophs can perform photosynthesis to manufacture their food, or they can perform chemosynthesis to manufacture their own food. Now, my dear students, it's the time to understand more about heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Let us take up that. So, let us take up this heterotrophic nutrition. Let us go into it a bit more. So what do you call these organisms which show heterotrophic mode of nutrition? We call them the heterotrophs, or we call them the consumers. Okay, remember this point. Now, my dear students, there are different organisms which show heterotrophic mode of nutrition. For example, if you take into consideration a man, a bear, a crow, a dog, a rabbit, for that matter, even if you take into consideration amoeba, there are different organisms, even for that matter, the fungus, that also performs the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. They are dependent on others. They cannot synthesize their own food. So all the organisms which belong to the animal kingdom, all the animals, they are heterotrophs. Okay, that's why they are different from, plants. They cannot synthesize their own food. Now, still in heterotrophic mode of nutrition, we have some types. Okay, so we have heterotrophic mode of nutrition divided into following types. Number one is the parasitic mode of nutrition. I'll simply write down parasitic nutrition. So these are the types of heterotrophic nutrition. Number second is the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. I'll write down saprotrophic nutrition. Okay. Number third is the mixotrophic nutrition. Okay. Number fourth, this one we are going to discuss in detail. It's Holozoic nutrition. Okay. We have to discuss them one by one. Okay. In case of parasitic mode of nutrition, let me first of all tell you what happens over here is that in this mode of nutrition, one organism derives its food from another organism. But the case is very difficult because the organism which gets the food is benefited, but the organism from which food is drawn or from which the food is derived is harmed. So this includes two organisms. So you got this point. One organism is going to be benefited and another organism is going to be harmed. So this nutrition involves two organisms. Try and understand now. So one organism is going to act as a host. Okay? The host is going to be in the loss. Okay? It's the host from which the nutrition is drawn. And the other organism, which you must call the guest. Okay? It's basically a guest. But it's not guest. It's not a good guest. It's a bad guest. We call it a parasite. So parasite gets its food from the host, whereby the host is in loss and the parasite is benefited. Means it's on profit side because it got its nutrition. Now, let me give you an example. You might have heard about lice. They're very common in man. They're very common with other animals also. Let's talk about man. So man can have these lice on the body. Maybe on the hair, maybe on the head, within the hair, or maybe on the body. So this lice lives on the body. On the body of host. Okay? Lice itself gets benefited because it sucks the blood. It basically stings you and then it draws the blood from your body. You feel the itchy sensation. You itch and you scratch at that place. So you are in loss. You feel the harm. Okay, you are in loss. But the lice itself is benefited. So lice and man have a parasitic relationship where lice is the parasite and man is the host. Or let me take another example. You might have heard about roundworms. Okay, roundworms which live inside. They live inside the body of host. Where do they live? They live in your small intestines. They live over there. Okay, they use the food which is basically your food. They take up that food. Okay, so they are compromising your nutrition. You are basically losing a part of your nutrition to the roundworms. But if their load will increase, the worm, if their number will increase in the intestines, you will suffer from a disease that is called ascariasis. This is a disease you can suffer from, in which your intestines will be damaged, different organs of your body will be damaged. So the host is, in this case, it's again in loss. In this case, it's again in loss. But the parasite, who is the parasite? The lice is the parasite. Roundworms are the parasites. They are benefited. Their nutrition is done. Lice gets the food in the form of blood from the body of the host. Roundworms get the food in soluble form from the intestines of the host. Now, my dear students, there is one important point which you can understand over here. This type of parasite which lives on the body of the host. I have written, it lives on the body of the host. Let me write down, it lives on the body of the host. You call this parasite ectoparasite. It lives on the body. It doesn't live inside the body. Whereas this type of parasite, the roundworm type or the tapeworm type, which lives inside the body of the host, you call this parasite endoparasite. What do you call it? Endoparasite. So again, you got a point, very important point, that parasites are of two types. Number one, the ectoparasites. Number two are the endoparasites. And how will you define parasitic mode of nutrition is that in this mode of nutrition, two organisms are required. One organism gets the food or the nutrition from the body of another organism. The organism which is benefited or the organism which gets the nourishment or the food is called the parasite. Whereas the organism which is harmed, which is not benefited, which is in loss, that organism is called the host. Some examples of the host is here. Man is the host, and the examples of the parasites I have given you is the lice and the roundworms. The difference is the lice lives on the body, roundworms live inside the body. Accordingly, you call these ectoparasites and you call these endoparasites. Now let us take up the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. So, parasitic mode of nutrition is done. Now we need to focus upon the saprotrophic mode of nutrition. My dear students, saprotrophic word is derived from sapro. Okay? It has two words, sapro and troph. Sapro, it means rotten. Okay? Rotten. Something which is decomposing. Something which is rotten. And troph is obviously the nutrition. So, in saprotrophic mode of nutrition, an organism obtains or an organism derives its food. Try and notice. An organism in this mode of nutrition, saprotrophic mode of nutrition, an organism derives its food from, this is very important, where from they derive the food? From dead and decaying organic matter. So these organisms, they get their food from dead and decaying organic matter. Now what is that? Let me make you understand. Let me take this piece of bread. This case is very interesting. Okay? This is a piece of fresh bread. This piece of bread, you have kept this on a table and the temperature is very nice. It's not cold, the temperature is very hot, and there's a lot of humidity in the air. So the conditions are like this. It's a very hot, sunny day, and you forgot to take away this piece of bread, and overnight this piece of bread remains there on the shelf. Now, see what will happen. In air, remember, you always have the spores of fungus. Always you have these spores of fungus in air. Let me take the fungus over here. The fungus which I am taking is the bread mold. Do you know bread mold? The scientific name is Rhizopus. Okay, students generally have a confusion with rhizobium and rhizopus. Rhizopus is the fungus which is commonly called bread mold. Rhizobium is a bacteria. Okay, they're different. So over here I am talking about air. Air generally has these spores. Okay, so you have these spores in air. Now what happens? These spores will fall on the bread. They will settle down on the surface of the bread. Now what is bread? Bread has nutrients. Bread is basically what? Organic matter. Once what is this circle? This is the spore. Try and understand. Spore of whom? The bread mold. The rhizopus, which is a fungus. On this piece of bread, the spore will, first of all, it will germinate. Okay, as the seed germinates in the soil, the spore will germinate on the piece of bread. What will come out of the spore are the threads of the fungus. What will come out is the young, I will use the simple terminology, the young fungus comes over here. Fungal body doesn't have head, arms and legs. Fungal body is made up of threads. It's made up of threads, what we call the hypha. Okay, so these threads will come out, and within some time, the entire this bread piece will be covered with these threads. Entire bread piece will be covered with these fungal threads. And now what do these fungal threads do? What will this fungus do now? It will release some enzymes. So these dots are the enzymes released by what? Fungus on the bread. Now I have made you understand in previous lecture also that enzymes are similar to the scissors. As the scissors can cut some cloth, same is the case with enzymes. They can also cut the substances. They can break the complex substances into the simple substances. Now what will this fungus start doing? What will this rhizopus start doing? This rhizopus will start releasing these enzymes on the bread. Now what will happen to the bread is that in bread you have the nutrients. So what will happen is the breakdown of nutrients in bread by enzymes. So what is being done by the fungus is a kind of digestion. Very good. So fungus is performing digestion outside its body. Okay. After digestion, what will be produced over here are basically the simple nutrients. What will be produced after digestion are simple nutrients. The same nutrients. So now over here you have the simple nutrients. The same nutrients will be absorbed by the fungus. The same nutrients will be absorbed. They'll be absorbed by fungus. The same nutrients will be absorbed by fungus. So what has been done? Since the fungus got the nutrients, so we can say that the nutrition is done. That the nutrition is done. So such a type of nutrition is called saprotrophic nutrition. Now why we call it sapro is once all this is happening, what is rotting? what is decomposing, what is getting degraded is the piece of bread. This piece of bread is undergoing degradation, decomposition. It is decomposing into simple substances, and who is decomposing it is basically the fungus itself. So the organism which performs a saprotrophic mode of nutrition is basically decomposing the dead body. It is basically decomposing the dead body, during which its nourishment is also completed. So I have given you the example of Rhizopus, which is commonly called the bread mold. You can remember the example of Chilomonas. It's also a saprophytic organism. You can remember, for that matter, the fungus, the general mushrooms. They are also saprotrophic in nutrition. Even some bacteria are also saprotrophic in their mode of nutrition. The best and the versatile example is that of the bread mold, which is growing on the bread, releasing the enzymes onto the bread, breaking down the bread into, breaking down the nutrients present in the bread into simple substances, and then absorbing the same substances, getting its nourishment done. So how will you define saprotrophic mode of nutrition? Is that mode of nutrition in which an organism derives its food from dead and decaying organic matter. The example of organic matter over here is bread, and how it is decaying, I have given you the complete explanation for that. Now let me take you to the mixotrophic mode of nutrition. That is very simple. Now pay attention. Mixotrophic is slightly mixed behavior kind of, you can say. The example over here is, the best example is Euglena. Euglena is basically a unicellular. It's a unicellular eukaryotic protista. You can say protestan organism. Okay, so it's unicellular, just one cell. So if I'll show you the schematic representation, it's somewhat like this. Okay, a very simple structure I'm showing over here. So this is like it. It has a flagella also, and this is its body. It shows dual behavior. See, it has this organelle. This is the chloroplast. See, since it has chloroplast, definitely it will have chlorophyll, and definitely it can perform photosynthesis. So by this, we get to conclude that it is showing autotrophic nutrition. Doesn't it show? Because it has the machinery to show autotrophic nutrition. It has chloroplast. It can perform photosynthesis. Okay? But the thing is, Almighty Allah has made it so special. Suppose if there is absence of sunlight. If there is absence of sunlight. Now there is no sunlight. It cannot perform photosynthesis because photosynthesis requires sunlight. Under these circumstances, it can show heterotrophic nutrition. That is very, unique. Under those circumstances, what it can do, if there is no sunlight, outside Euglena, if there will be some, nutrients, but they should be simple nutrients. Suppose they are outside, and currently it cannot perform photosynthesis because sunlight is not available. Under these conditions, it can basically uptake these nutrients from outside. So under absence of sunlight, it can take up basically ready-made food. That is simple. It can take up ready-made food by the simple process of diffusion. It can take ready-made food by the simple process of diffusion. So over here, you got an idea that mixotrophic mode of nutrition is that mode of nutrition where organism can show both autotrophic nutrition as well as heterotrophic nutrition. For example, the Euglena. which is a unicellular eukaryotic protist organism. It has chloroplast and it can easily perform photosynthesis, but in absence of sunlight, it can simply diffuse or it can simply absorb the simple nutrients from its surroundings. And in that manner, it is taking up ready-made food. So in that manner, it becomes a heterotroph and shows heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So in today's lecture, we got to understand about what nutrition is. We saw nutrition is of two types, autotrophic mode of nutrition and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. I made you understand the different types of autotrophs, that is photoautotrophs and chemoautotrophs, and I made you understand about heterotrophic nutrition types, which are saprotrophic, parasitic, saprotrophic, mixotrophic and Holozoic nutrition. Now, obviously Holozoic nutrition I have not discussed in this part. We will take up this Holozoic mode of nutrition inshallah in the next lecture. Till then, take care of yourself. Al Hafiz.